The panel is the Matriarchs of New Thought. I will allow Reverend Soni Smith Cantrell, who...
Yeah, that's okay.
I put it backwards, didn't I?
Yeah.
Soni Cantrell Smith. Yes, excuse me, okay. To do the introductions beyond that, she is the president of the Centers for Spiritual Living, correct?
Spiritual leader.
Spiritual leader. And since I obviously have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm going to shut up. Reverend Dr. Soni.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you so much. Welcome all y'all. Now that you know who I am, sorta. I just want to say it's a real blessing to be with you all, and it's a blessing to be the moderator for this incredibly inspiring panel. But before we get started, as we always do, I'm just going to invite you all to close your eyes if you're comfortable and just drop down into that place, that space, that heart space where we know that there is only one. The power and the presence of that one fully orbed in this room right here and right now, with each panelist and each individual here to participate in this beautiful and amazing history of women in New Thought. How blessed we are to be together in this moment, knowing that the inspiration has already been laid down far beyond and far before we came into these walls of New Thought. How incredible it is to be blessed by these pioneers whose shoulders we stand upon. I know that today is a blessing for all, and as it unfolds in that divine order, for there is nothing but the divine. I know that all we need to know is fully represented as our hearts and souls right here, right now. I just breathe into this truth. I just breathe in knowing that all is well in spirit. All is well in God. So therefore, all is well right here and right now as we begin, as we all say, and so it is. So we do gather here. You know, this is the 110th annual INTA Congress, which is an organization, as Tim has so eloquently said before, dedicated to spiritual enlightenment and transformation of individuals and of the world. And we celebrate unity and diversity across various faith traditions. Today, our focus, as you've heard, is on honoring the women who founded a New Thought religious movement, the Matriarchs of Inclusive Peace and Justice Ministries. Now, this session illuminates a remarkable and groundbreaking development in global religious history. You know, it's a faith tradition primarily established by women, yay, which continues to ordain predominantly female clergy. I gotta say, there's something about that. Representatives from 5 major denominations of New Thought will share passages and teachings from their women founders, showcasing the profound impact of matriarchal values in shaping ministries rooted in peace and justice, love, and radical inclusivity. So from trailblazers like Emma Curtis Hopkins, Mary Baker Eddy, Myrtle Fillmore, and Johnny Coleman, to contemporary leaders such as Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson, our presenters draw from the rich archives of the International New Thought Alliance, Divine Science, Unity, Religious Science, and the Universal Foundation for Better Living. So I want to also acknowledge Dr. Barbara Fields, who is a valued member of our New Thought Archives Consortium and Executive Director of the Association of Global New Thought, whose visionary leadership inspired this panel. So we're deeply grateful for her role in manifesting this divine idea that brings us all together today. So, you know, without further ado, let's get started. The first person I want to introduce to you is Reverend Michael Terranova, who is also a board member of the International New Thought Alliance and owner of Wise Women Press. He is now an independent New Thought minister who promotes the teachings of Emma Curtis Hopkins. He publishes all of Emma's major works, as well as 22 of her Bible interpretation series through Wise Women. And he has many unpublished things that he is yet to publish. Michael was first licensed as a minister at the Teachings of the Inner Christ in San Diego in 1979. He was a licensed practitioner at Abundance Life Center in Vancouver, Washington in 1996. He was ordained in the Christ Church of Co-Creation in Portland, Oregon in 2009. Michael, you're on.
Well, here you can see who I am at a younger age. Here's a picture of me at a younger time when my hair was a little darker. That's probably 15. Oh, that's when I was ordained. That's my picture standing next to Marcia. I will talk to you about Emma Curtis Hopkins. She definitely, Emma Curtis Hopkins was the founder of New Thought, according to many people. They call her the mother of New Thought or the founder of New Thought. There are other people that were before her, but she taught 50,000 people, which that's a lot of people. I mean, how many people are in our organizations? When she taught, she was able to bring in Bible interpretations. She's able to bring in many of the books have been translated from the Hindus. She brought in the Bhagavad Gita. She brought in the Tao. Because as I look through her teachings, as I'm publishing books, I could see there's a point where the Eastern teachings come in. They're not in the first of her when she's teaching, but I can see how that came in. So she brought a lot of new stuff in. How she got involved in New Thought was she had some kind of a breathing problem. I'm not sure what it is, but she went to one of the students of Mary Baker Eddy's, and she was actually healed. So she contacted Mary Baker Eddy, and she wanted to be part of the teaching there. So she was there. She was accepted. She was there for a few years. She was head of the publishing of the magazine. But there came a point where she was told, "You're not here anymore." Mary Baker Eddy didn't tell her that, one of the assistants. And no one really ever has been able to totally figure out why, except that mostly what the people that have figured out anything is that Emma was putting other teachings in besides the Bible, other teachings in besides Mary Baker Eddy. As I'm pretty sure all of you know how the Church of Religious Science, how her teachings were. She was totally in the teachings. Words that come I don't want to say. She did influence a lot of people, but her teachings were limited. So in the first class that Emma taught in Chicago, Myrtle and Charles Fillmore were in that class. Annie Ricks Millets was in that class, and she became a teacher there. Emma and Myrtle were friends from 1888 or 87 to 1923 or 25. Emma died in 1925. I have letters here that Emma wrote to Myrtle Fillmore from the time that they were together at Emma's classes. The last one I have here is 1923, and it starts out, "Dearest girl." Here's one from 1916, "My beloved Myrtle Fillmore." So for me, it's easy to see how much Emma influenced unity. She ordained Charles and Myrtle. So I'm really happy that I've got all these facts. And Jolene here got me these. I don't know how I would have found them otherwise. Annie Ricks Millis founded a group of churches called the Home of Truth. There's still one of their churches in Oakland, California. Their minister came one year to the INTA, and it was really interesting that since I'm the archive freak, we were in the archives and there was a diary from Annie Ricks Millis, how she wrote classes down, I think the diary started when she was 16, so it wasn't always when she was in the teachings. So a lot of that stuff is in the archives. That's one of the reasons I'm really so supportive of archives, and these other ladies here too. Some of Emma's students, Harriet Beecher Stowe, she wrote a book on Uncle Tom's Cabin. She was very involved with Emma. 'Cause I have 4 years of the books of the magazines that were published by Emma's seminary. So she's in there. Many of the New Thought leaders or people of those days are in those. There's articles in there. My hope is to take that giant stack of papers and create some books. So that's where I am with it. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. She was a poet and she wrote some racy stuff for the day. Now, we know who she is, Harriet Emily Cady. She wrote The Lessons in Truth. That book now is very popular in Unity, and I'm sure you'll hear about it. But it's interesting to see how Emma's students influence New Thought. She has influenced all of the organizations that I know of except for UFBL, because Johnny Como was born May after Emma died. Now, Ernest Holmes was her last student. And his brother, in one of the books, talks about how he was really inspired, how he really got in touch with the mystical part of Christ through Emma. And if any of you read Emma or have studied Emma, there's a transmission that comes through. Not necessarily the words, but there's a consciousness that comes through. And he really got it. And it's interesting to see how much it influenced how he wrote The Science of Mind. The books were published, a lot of her books were published after she died. People think some of those books were written by her, especially Scientific Christian Mental Practice, which has been taught, and everybody thinks she wrote it. It was written by her students from her notes. I have copies of the papers from their organization. The first chapter was published in 1933. So you can see Emma did not write it, but when you read it, it comes through as her teachings. When she died, an organization was called, the High Watch Fellowship was formed. I think it was 1926 or 27. Her sister and some other ministers were part of it. They accepted students there for classes. They sent out teachers for classes. So they were involved in the whole New Thought movement then. In 1940, Emma's sister and other people that were involved took the Emma Curtis Hopkins teachings away from the High Watch Fellowship. There's a whole lot of secret, not revealed stuff about the people involved in. I know some of them, but I don't know all of them. Right now, this place is called the Joy Farm. It's the Joy Farm. They still do High Watch recovery. They have Alcoholics Anonymous classes there. When this closed, Bill W. from the Alcoholics Anonymous was there for a while. They offered the property to him. He said that he couldn't accept it. I have no reason why, no understanding why, but even he was influenced by Emma. So it's quite interesting to see how many people have been influenced by her. Now, these are people that have supported me. Uta Maria Sadia gave me the first manuscripts to publish. She has been a real support. Isabel Van Merlen worked with Marge Flotron, who published Emma's books for a while. She gave me a lot of the stuff from her. Natalie Jean started an organization called Emma Curtis Hopkins Theological Seminary. She has not done a lot with it. She's more into being, she's popular as a singer now. So she's more out in the public than in handling it. And she has an Emma tattoo right there. And Frankie Timmers, she is a CSL Morristown, New Jersey. She's been teaching the classes for 10 years. I finally got to meet her at the Parliament. It's really good to see people that have, I don't want to say infected, that are really touched by Emma's teachings. She is. There's other teachers in New Jersey that teach. She definitely is a good friend. Now, these are women that have published the stuff. Marge Flotron passed on around the year 2000. And I thought my teachers were going to publish stuff, and they didn't. And Reverend Joanna Rogers published some of the stuff. Nobody's ever got the stuff published with ISBNs, which is interesting. I have. These are some ladies that have been really involved. Shirley Lawrence, no, Reverend Carmelita Trowbridge had a church in Pasadena. It was a religious science church. She changed the name of it to Sanctuary of Truth and only taught Emma's stuff. She lost half of her congregation. She never got it back. But what she did, she promoted Emma. And Reverend Shirley Lawrence actually did correspondence courses. I have a lot of her stuff. Sometimes some classes might be taught from her stuff. And then we have Dr. Ruth Miller, who started Wise Woman Press in 2006. And I was invited, I think, in 2007. And we published so many books. It wasn't enough for me, so I bought her out, and I've published 50 books since then. For me, she has other things to do. I have Emma to do. I'm really dedicated to making sure everything's out. I have 3 more Bible interpretations to do, and then this big stack of papers. In that stack of papers, every month there's a monthly meeting. Emma directly talking to people, not writing books. That stuff will be published. So for me, Emma's my ministry. And if you'd like to contact me, EmmaCurtisHopkins.com or WiseWomanPress.com. Right now, WiseOnePress.com is not up. Ruth Miller is working on that because I've turned over the business part to her. So that will be up. I do have an 800 number, and if anybody would like to talk to me and find out how to contact me, I do have some cards with me. I thank you very much for listening to me. Emma's my ministry.
Thank you, Michael. Our next New Thought denomination is Divine Science. Jolene Clark will be our presenter, and she is the archives manager at Unity World Headquarters, where we are. And she has a bachelor's degree in history and a master's degree in library science from the University of Missouri. She has been working on preserving the history of the Unity movement, and over 1 million items are now available. This is astounding to me. Over 1 million items are now available on Unity's new digital museum. That is amazing, yeah. And I think you also had a song written for you, right, Jolene?
No, when we came in, there was song stuff. I don't sing. And if you're really confused and this says Divine Science, that is correct. We were in a meeting and we have a group of people involved with New Thought Archives, And I stepped away from a virtual meeting for a minute. And when I came back, all I heard was, I'm sure Jolene would do that. So that's how I came to learn about divine science. So I hope I can do justice for the women of divine science, because it was a learning curve for me as well. But one of the things I found out is, I got to do the down. One of the things I found out as I started learning about divine science is that there's a definite connection between all of these early New Thought pioneers. They shared and built a movement, and over time they became separate denominations. So divine science is the first one that was formed in 1888. And up here on the screen, I have the divine science statement of being. And I want to tell you about the women that I really want to focus on today is Melinda Elliott Kramer, and then also the Nona, the Brooks sisters. So I'm going to start out with Melinda Elliott Kramer. So she spent her entire adult life suffering from consumption, which we know is tuberculosis. The doctors told her there was nothing that they could do for her, and their suggestion was to go west to California. So she settled in San Francisco. By 1885, she had given up on doctors, and she entered the practice of going into the silence to seek spiritual guidance. Her spiritual experience not only changed her mind and body, but led to a healing ministry, as well as informal classes to teach these new spiritual insights to her friends and acquaintances. So in 1888, she formed the Home College for Teaching Divine Science. And then later that year was the first publication came out called Harmony. And then a couple years later, she was teaching classes. She would travel all over the country in large cities. Sometimes she'd spend a few weeks there, and each week on the weekend, she would have a weekly sermon. Then during the day, she would set aside 3 to 4 hours for healing work. And she would do that whether she was on the road or whether she was at home in San Francisco. So in one of her travels, she actually came to Kansas City. And she was given access to a classroom that the Fillmores had, and she taught her primary and normal classes in divine science. And then kind of the takeaway and the connection from there, when she went back to San Francisco, she opened up a branch of Silent Unity in San Francisco. So she took that part of Unity back with her. And then her last issue of Harmony magazine was mailed just days before the Great San Francisco earthquake, which that was ultimately what led to Melinda Kramer's death on August 2nd, 1906. Just some of the injuries resulting from that and a recurrence of her tuberculosis. So we kind of jump over to Colorado and Pueblo, Colorado. So in Pueblo at the time, there was Kate Bingham, and she had been very ill. And so the physicians in Pueblo really couldn't help her out, so they referred her to some specialists in Chicago. So in 1887, she traveled to Chicago. The doctors there really weren't a lot of help, but while she was there, they suggested that she contact a healer and teacher named Emma Curtis Hopkins. So she spent 3 weeks of study and treatment with Emma Curtis Hopkins. And then she came back to Pueblo, and all of her friends noticed her radiant good health, and they began asking her about this transformation. And so she started teaching some informal classes. And in those classes, she became acquainted with the Brooks sisters. So Nona and Alethea attended her classes, and they found healing themselves. So those are the 3 Brooks sisters. So there's Nona, Alethea, and Fanny. All of them had suffered from poor health. They also had a lot of economic burdens early in life that contributed to that. Nona, she had a throat condition. It was so bad that she could not even eat solid foods. She said, I myself was in a very poor physical condition, being able to eat only very soft, especially prepared foods. For more than a year, I had been praying almost constantly, God, give me light. So the Brooks, this is where the other connections come in. The Brooks sisters were also friends with the Fillmores. They had their business associate. So Alethea Brooks Small married one of the business partners of Charles Fillmore. So I have, it's small at the bottom, but I brought it with me since we're here. I have a book in the archives, and when I opened it up inside, there's an inscription, and you can see it. It says, Myrtle Fillmore, a little expression of love from Fanny B. James. So there was that connection, and there was the friendship between many of these early people. So then we kind of jump there in Pueblo, but we kind of jump up to Denver. So Melinda Kramer, so actually the Brooks sisters, they attended a class by Melinda Kramer in 1889 in Denver. So Fanny actually took notes from that class, and so those were created. Some of the notes that she took there are a foundation for divine science movement and an important early part of New Thought literature. So all three of the Brooks sisters moved up to Denver in the 1890s, where they continued teaching their healing classes. Then 1898, Alethea, the oldest of the Brooks sisters, she played a key role in the establishment of the Colorado College of Divine Science and served as the first president in 1898 and 1899. And then 1899, Nona Brooks opened the first Church of Divine Science of Denver. And then a few years later, 1902, Melinda Kramer came back out to Denver, and she met with the Brooks sisters. With Kramer's permission, the sisters decided to use the term divine science to describe their teachings from that point forward. The ideas and teachings eventually merged to form the complete divine science philosophy. And then after Melinda Kramer died, Denver became the headquarters for the divine science teachings. So there were many women that helped the divine movement spread. So the women were often the ones that went out into the different areas and created centers in other locations. So the Stolberg sisters founded the first divine science church in Bellevue, Illinois. Sorry, I said that totally wrong, if anybody's from there. And then Nona Brooks ordained Ada B. Fay, who wrote the Divine Science Bible textbook, which we have a copy of that in the archives as well. So this is one of the earlier versions of that. And then Kathleen Beasley, she was a divine science minister who wrote the classic, The Divine Art of Living, in which she writes, "We cannot fear anything or anybody if we have the full realization that God is everywhere, that God is love, and that love is the great power of life." So here's another connection as well. Nona Brooks ordained Agnes Gaylor, who then moved to California and established a divine science church, and she lived with the Holmes family. So then eventually Agnes Gaylor moved to Seattle, developed a church there, and that's where she ordained Ernest Holmes. So the divine science, by the time it gets to its second generation, the Alethea Brooks has passed on, Fanny in 1906, and then Fanny James passed away in 1914. And then Nona Brooks tries to retire in 1926. Her congregation decided to gift her with a round the world cruise, and she went on her way. And on her way back, she went to Australia and she established 2 churches over there. So they kept her busy. And after her trip, she got back and she went back to the pulpit, and that kind of gave her some energy. And then she was intermittently at the pulpit until the 1940s. So there you go, cruise around the world. It'll do you wonders. So some of the influences of the New Thought leaders, the divine science, the women there, many of them had been associated with Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore, also the Holmes, Ernest Holmes and Fenwick Holmes. And then many of the women also were involved in their day in many of the social movements. So they were involved in Denver with such things as the Denver Civic Board, the Colorado State Prison Board. Wherever they went, they were trying to make changes for the better. The women of divine silence were the embodiment of truth and principle. They sought to change and improve the lives in which they lived. The teachings of divine science are as meaningful today as they were when they were first formalized in 1888 by Melinda Kramer in San Francisco. The movement grew further with the work of Nona Brooks in Denver, And she was often quoted as saying, "It is not a religion we are making, it is life." There you go. And since we didn't have a group on our panel when we originally did this, but if you do want to find out more about divine science, I do have their website on there that you can visit.
Thank you. Thank you, Jolene. Our next presenter is presenting our New Thought denomination, Unity. And that is Reverend Ellen Debenport, who is minister, author, and vice president of publishing for Unity World Headquarters. Ellen is a Unity minister currently serving as the vice president. Before coming to work at Unity Village, she led churches in Dallas and Wimberley, Texas. A former journalist, Ellen is the author of The 5 Principles, which is studied in Unity around the world, and Hell in the Highway, Light at the Door, a book about the spiritual path through change and transition. They are both available at the Unity bookstore, so make sure you check that out. All right, you're on. Thank you, Ellen.
Microphone, we'll see if I'm discoordinated. It's my pleasure and privilege to be with you today to get to speak about Myrtle Fillmore, the woman who co-founded Unity and some of the women who later built it. Unity is, of course, part of the New Thought movement. Oneness is the prime principle. One power, call it God or good or divine mind or spirit, whatever name you give to all that is. And if it's all one, then that means humanity is a part of that divinity, that one. So we are fully human and fully divine. You know, studying Myrtle, I've had to give up my stereotype that women who were living more than a century ago were all mothers who tended home and hearth. I mean, they might have been mothers who had homes, but obviously we have an entire spiritual movement that was based largely on the work of women. And some very good men were involved too. Myrtle Fillmore founded Unity with her husband, Charles. She had been the quintessential school marm who married late. Charles was 9 years younger, which I just love. They had 3 little boys. Both of them read widely. They wrote and published. Unity started with a magazine, not a church. The magazine was first called Modern Thought, and then Unity Magazine for a long, long time. And as of this year, it is Spirituality and Health, a Unity publication, because Unity bought Spirituality and Health and merged it with Unity Magazine. So it's still the Fillmore's original magazine. It just has yet another name. Books and magazines were the way that Charles and Myrtle shared what they were learning about spiritual principles, and publishing is still a primary part of the Unity mission. So one of Myrtle's early ideas, once they started Unity, was to start a children's magazine. She called it Wee Wisdom. Her boys provided some of the editing and the artwork, and she wrote about their adventures in her monthly column. At one point, Wee Wisdom was the longest-running children's magazine in America. It stayed in print for 98 years, until 1991, and we still have people asking us to bring it back. Old people. About the same time, in 1890, Myrtle created the Unity Prayer Ministry that continues to thrive worldwide. It's called Silent Unity. It receives over 1 million prayer requests every year. She simply prayed with anyone who asked, in person or by letter, and later by telephone, and now 40% of the prayer requests come in online. So was Myrtle a feminist? Let's come back to that. Because first, let me tell you a little more about the Unity movement. Charles and Myrtle both wrestled with physical ailments all their lives. And medicine, as we've heard, in the late 1800s was really primitive. It was common to try bloodletting or doses of poison as a treatment. By 1889, when Unity was founded, germ theory was just a brand new idea, and most doctors didn't believe it. So Charles and Myrtle had had bad luck with doctors, and they looked for alternative means of healing, spiritual means. And I'm struck by how much Myrtle's story is like Melinda Kramer's from Divine Science. Myrtle had tuberculosis and malaria. When she was 40, the doctors said she had 6 months to live. In 1886, this was before Unity, Charles and Myrtle went to a lecture one night by a metaphysician named E.B. Weeks. We don't know exactly what he said, but we know that Myrtle came away just seized with the idea, I am a child of God, and therefore I do not inherit sickness. And so for 2 years after that, she meditated hours every day working with that thought, speaking to each part of her body. She says she gave up gossip or any angry words or thoughts in all areas of her life, and she healed. Now, she also kept up the meditation and the healthy living for the rest of her life. So Charles was watching all of this and thought he would try it too, and he healed his withered leg. Years later, he said it actually had grown longer. So they found in 1889, based on the power of prayer and the power of thoughts to manifest. Myrtle ended up living to be 86. She died in 1931. So back to our question, was Myrtle Fillmore a feminist? We don't hear about her marching in the streets with the suffragettes of her era. She was 75 when women got the vote in 1920. She lived a life of the mind. Even as a child, she read everything she could get her hands on, including material that was thought to be for boys. At 21, she enrolled in a teaching program at Oberlin College in Ohio. Now, Oberlin had been founded as the first co-educational college in America. They admitted women and Black students. As far as we know, there was never any question in Unity that women would be included as ordained ministers and leaders. So the first class of students in Unity was ordained in 1906, 5 women, 4 men, including Charles and Myrtle. By 1933, this was the class of ministers being ordained. They're all women. And more recently, this is 2016, still the majority women. About 2/3 of the ministers in Unity are women. We know Myrtle best through her letters. We don't have many of the letters she received, but we know what she wrote in response, and you can kind of tell the problems she was addressing. And in letters, we pick up the threads of women's equality and strength. She often seemed to want to instill backbone in women and draw them out of their stories into principle. So I'd like to share just a couple of my favorite passages because Myrtle was feisty. One woman had written about her lazy brother who was freeloading on the family and distressing their mother. And Myrtle insisted that both the writer and her mother would do best to stand up for themselves. She said, "The best thing to do is establish your faith in God and in the God self of your brother. Declare the truth for him and then leave it with his own soul to respond. Have a talk with him if he lives in your home and let him know that you feel he must either take a very active and effective hand in keeping up the home or get out and make another home for himself." She had no patience for people's sad stories. As kindly as she could, she did not buy into their drama. This was another one. "No matter what you tell us of sorrow or lack or failure or illness, we do not believe it, and we do not let it take hold in our minds and hearts. If we should do such a thing, we should become powerless to help you." How many of us have been taught, don't get into their stories? Hold the high watch. She wanted everyone's consciousness at Christ level all the time. Just don't waste your thoughts on anything trivial or negative. And of course, Myrtle paved the way for other women in New Thought. In 1916, she hired a young woman just out of high school to replace her as the head of Silent Unity, the prayer ministry. May Rowland served in that role for 55 years, writing, speaking, teaching about affirmative prayer, until she retired in 1971. These are a couple of her favorite affirmations. I am the ever-renewing, ever-unfolding expression of infinite life, love, and wisdom. I'm alive, alert, awake, joyous, and enthusiastic about my work. Also prominent among the early Unity women was H. Emily Cady in New York City. She was one of the first women doctors in America. She sent the Fillmores an unsolicited pamphlet she'd written, and they were so impressed they asked her to write a year-long series of lessons for Unity magazine. In 1903, those 12 articles were bound into the first book Unity ever published, and Lessons in Truth is still one of the foundational teachings of Unity today. Just 20 years after Myrtle died, Johnny Coleman turned Unity upside down when she came as a ministerial student in the early 1950s and was told that Black students couldn't live on campus. Now, Unity had welcomed Black students in classes for decades by that point, but they couldn't stay here overnight. That was common in Missouri in that era, and that's no excuse. So backed by her white classmates, Johnny Coleman got that policy changed and moved onto the grounds. You'll hear more about her from Sheila. She went on to serve 20 years as a Unity leader, including the first Black president of the Association of Unity Churches. And then in 1974, she founded her own branch of New Thought, the Universal Foundation for Better Living. But we like to claim her success for Unity too, and we're grateful for the awareness that she brought to the movement. Catherine Ponder was ordained in 1958. She founded Unity Church Worldwide as a global ministry. Ponder wrote dozens of books about prosperity and healing, and she was the queen of affirmations. You can pick from the hundreds of them in her books. Just a couple of these. God is so good, life is so wonderful, and I am so richly blessed. Or everything I do turns into good for myself and others. She's still with us. She's 97 years old now. So here are the women we've talked about from the first century of Unity. Of course, there were many more. And the women leaders in Unity today, really too many to mention. Thanks to Myrtle Fillmore, the predominance of women continues. And we know that female leaders outside of Unity have been influenced by her legacy. Marianne Williamson, Oprah, Maya Angelou. We all have Myrtle's legacy to live up to. And all of us in New Thought owe a debt to this woman for helping bring these ideas and these teachings to the world.
Thank you so much. Our fourth presenter, who's going to talk about our New Thought denomination, religious science, is Reverend Kathy Mastrioanni. And Reverend Kathy is the executive director of the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, which is located here now, and we're all really happy about that. Reverend Kathy's core mission is reveal peace and individuality and collectively on the planet using the powerful and peaceful tools of science of mind. Reverend Kathy is an ordained minister through Centers for Spiritual Living, and of course, as I said, the executive director of the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation for the past 10 years, preserving, protecting, and sharing the timeless wisdom of Science of Mind. She's also been a past member of CSL's Heart of Peace initiative and has co-hosted Rise Up for Peace on the Facebook page. She was also the CEO and later led a weekly empowerment group for a rural mountain domestic violence shelter, ever working towards peace. So let's welcome Kathy.
Hi, thank you all so much. What a beautiful honor it is to be here to represent the powerful women of religious science in regards to peace and justice ministries. I'd like to start off with some excerpts of the Declaration of Principles as written by Dr. Ernest Holmes and published in the very first Science Mind magazine in October 1927. I just invite them for you to take them into your heart. We believe the ultimate goal of life to be a complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. We believe in the unity of all life, and that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. We believe that God is personal to all who feel this indwelling presence. We believe in the healing of the sick and control of conditions through the power of this mind. And we believe in the eternal goodness, the eternal loving kindness, and the eternal givingness of life to all. And so this is Dr. Ernest Holmes, founder of Religious Science. And I know what some of you might be thinking. This is a dude. It's a guy. Here we're talking about the matriarchs of New Thought. And here I am talking about this feller. I'm going to make a case for how Dr. Holmes and the religious science teaching was primarily influenced by women. And then he created a movement that continues to be primarily led by powerful, inspirational women. And I love this part because, and you'll just hear the weavings of all the different New Thought denominations here. I love how it all comes together. It's just so beautiful. So he is a renowned American metaphysical teacher and author. And he was born in 1887, right at the time when unity and divine science were being born. So think about that kind of timeline. He's the founder of Science and Mind philosophy, also known as religious science, which combines the golden thread of truth of all the different philosophies and religions. Dr. Holmes emphasized the power of positive thinking and the innate ability of individuals to shape our own lives through our thoughts and beliefs. In 1918, he was ordained as a divine science minister, as you heard by Agnes Gaylor. In 1926, he wrote the Science of Mind textbook, and it's a seminal work in the field of religious science. And then he formally established the religious science movement by incorporating the Institute of Religious Science and School of Philosophy in 1927. And how cool, when you come to visit our archives down the road, we have those incorporation papers framed. And the coolest thing, it was on Valentine's Day, 1927, February 14th, 1927, a day dedicated to love, our movement dedicated to love. And in 1960, he made his transition, leaving his legacy for each one of us to carry on in the world of peace, love, and law. And I am a peace kind of gal. And so this is one of my favorite things about Dr. Ernest Holmes, is he really was all about peace. And this is from An American Spiritual Awakening. It was on September 21st through the 25th in 1941, which is exactly 20 years prior to the United Nations establishing the International Day of Peace. I mean, talk about a forerunner. Dr. Holmes was with Dr. Frank B. Robinson at the Philharmonic Auditorium in Los Angeles, California during World War II. And they had this packed house, over 5,000 people coming together. And I'm going to read the statement. I'm going to invite you to read it with me afterwards. Let there be immediate peace on earth through the power of the Spirit of the living God. Let's say it together. Let there be immediate peace on earth through the power of the Spirit of the living God. Amen. Yeah. I like it. And his very first woman influence was Anna Holmes, his mom. Oh, I love that. His mother was just brought Ernest Holmes to be curious and to believe in that God is a good and loving God. And one of the other very interesting things is most of the women who've been brought into New Thought had a health challenge. Ernest Holmes came into it because he was curious. He never had a health challenge, and it was really because he just wanted to learn more. And I just think that's really fascinating. Anna Holmes is also known as Mother Holmes to the movement. She was just endearing. And she graduated from Dr. Holmes' very first practitioner class in 1927. This is kind of fun. We have the signatures of all that very first class in 1927. And if you look by Dr. Holmes' name at the top, it just says teacher. And then the third name down is Anna C. Holmes. I just think that's just so sweet. All right, another very powerful influence is his wife, Hazel Holmes. And she met Ernest when Ernest was 40 years old and Hazel was 43. And she became Dr. Holmes' personal practitioner, and she was also a writer for Science of Mind magazine. She had a couple not very pleasant relationships and marriages beforehand, and her Aunt Gussie brought her to see Ernest at the Institute building. And so they went in for a practitioner session. And, you know, usually the sessions with Ernest were like 10 minutes. I mean, he would just kind of know the truth. But they were in there for like an hour. And when she walked out, she said to Gussie, "He knows Papa." And her word for God, he knows Papa. And they were just connected ever since. And again, we mentioned Reverend Agnes Gaylor from Divine Science. And of course, Emma Curtis Hopkins, you know, teacher of teachers. And I love that Ernest Holmes was her last student in 1925. And then again, if you look at those timelines, in 26, he wrote the Science of Mind textbook, and in 27, he incorporated the movement. I mean, very powerful influences. And here are some really amazing ministers through the movement that Dr. Holmes supported. This is Reverend Dr. Pearl C. Wood, known as Mother Pearl. I love that, from 1892 to 1974. One of her quotes is, "Life turns to us as we turn to it." She established the Triangular Church in 1932. In 57, she received a charter from the Church of Religious Science by Dr. Holmes himself. And in 1964, she was honored with the recognition of the Doctor of Religious Science. And there are rumors out there that Dr. Holmes would go to her Sunday service in the morning and then do his service in the afternoon. And then we have Reverend Dr. Peggy Bassett. Boy, was she a powerful powerhouse. "We must be committed to being free, standing up and following our own hearts." She became a religious science minister at the age of 50, following a successful career in real estate. Get this, she built the Huntington Beach Church in California from 40 members in the early 70s to more than 5,000 members. In 1988, she was the first woman elected president of the United Church of Religious Science. And here's some other key leaders. This is Reverend Dr. Candace Beckett. She's the former president of the Religious Science International, and you'll see her in the next minister. They had an important role in the integration of our movement from the international and united, bringing together into oneness as centers for spiritual living. She's the founder and former senior minister of Ukiah Center for Spiritual Living, and she was also a regional support coordinator for our movement. And then here's Reverend Dr. Kathy Hearn. We have a number of books on the history of religious science through the archives, Chronicles of Religious Science, and you see both of their names throughout during the time of integration when the movement came together, their great vision of oneness. And she's community spiritual leader of the United Centers for Spiritual Living for 10 years, and again, had a role in that integration. She was the director of the School of Spiritual Leadership, and she is the current dean of the School of Spiritual Leadership San Diego campus. She's a bright light, and she has touched so many lives. And then this is Reverend Dr. Marilyn Leo. I call her the Energizer Bunny of the movement. Bless her heart. She was born 1935, so she is 89 years old right now, and she is the founder of the Science of Mind archives. She was a close neighbor and personal friend of Dr. Ernest Holmes. She lived right next door, And she keeps saying, I wish I knew 20 years before, you know, what she knew then. She was 6 years old when they moved next door to him. And again, she founded the archives with her then husband, Richard, her late husband, Richard Leo, and about 27 years ago. And it was just stuff that was in closets. And they said, we need an archive. And they just started pulling it together. And it evolved into 2 tractor trailers of 45,000 pounds and 900 boxes, which is what we just moved. So bless her heart. She did a good job. And so she continues to capture the history, and she's passing it forward for generations to come. And here's some other inspirational women of religious science. Again, way too many to list. You know, I had them on one slide. I had to move them to 2 slides because there's just so many, and we're so blessed. And here's some statistics. Oh, and here's our current leadership of Centers for Spiritual Living, and we're so honored to have Reverend Dr. Soni with us as our moderator. Reverend Dr. Alice Reed is the Leadership Council Chair, and Reverend Michelle Ariano is the CSL Executive Director. And out of 11 leadership positions, 8 are filled with women. Here's some statistics. Graduating practitioners from 1949 to 23, get this, 10,000 of them, 76% are female. And again, you'll notice that's the same percentage from the very first class that Ernest taught. Ministerial students of 100 of the 140, so another 71% are students at the Holmes Institute and School of Spiritual Leadership. And again, one of the favorites and the worldwide, she took it out to the world, is Louise Hay. You know, what a blessing she has been. She is known as one of the founders of the self-help movement. She started her life's work in New York City in 1970, and she attended meetings at the Church of Religious Science with Reverend Dr. Raymond Charles Barker and entered the ministerial program graduating in 1980. She received an honorary doctorate of divinity from Religious Science International in 2001, and her first book, Heal Your Body, was published in 1976, discussing the connections between mind and body. And this book went out to 33 different countries and translated into 25 languages throughout the world. And again, if you'd like more information, we continue to create a world that works for everyone. Learn more at csl.org or sciencemindarchives.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. For our final presentation today, it is by Reverend Sheila McKeithen, who is talking about the Universal Foundation for Better Living. Now, Reverend Sheila is an attorney, author, spiritual activist, ordained minister, leading a New Thought community in Kingston, Jamaica. She also serves as the president of the Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary and the Universal Foundation for Better Living, established in 1974 by the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman. Sheila was inducted into the International Board of Preachers at Morehouse College more than 22 years ago. She hosts an annual self-care retreat in September of every year, and she has a passion for New Thought history and teachings, especially as it relates to justice, healing, relationships, financial freedom, forgiveness, and the power of love, as they enable her to overcome a medical prognosis of less than 6 days to live. Her favorite scripture is Psalms 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." Her ministry motto, "Give your all to God, for God has given it all to you." Reverend Sheila, you're on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soni. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor and privilege to share the powerful story of the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, the founder, the matriarch of the Universal Foundation for Better Living, a New Thought Christian network of ministries located in the U.S., Canada, the Caribbean, and South America, with a following globally and a dedicated commitment to inclusivity, peace, nonviolence, freedom, and justice. I must also say, I don't know how many on the panel can say, but I actually walked with my founder. In other words, I got to, I was there, I knew her, we walked, she taught me, that kind of thing. So I just feel very blessed. And so today, just honor your teachers because you never know where it all may end up, right? Okay. The story begins in 1952 with a telephone call. The voice on the other end of the telephone line asked to speak to Johnny M. Haley. "Speaking, may I help you?" said Johnny. The voice said to her, "You have an incurable disease. You will die in 6 months." Johnny sat there with tears streaming down her face. When she stood up to walk toward her bedroom, her leg bumped against a table and a Unity magazine fell on the floor. As she picked up the magazine, the words, "God is your health, you can't be sick," leapt off the page and captured her attention. My research shows, thank you, Jolene, Unity Archives. My research shows from the Unity Archives that the weekly Unity magazine is dated March the 16th, 1952. It's pictured on screen, and in it is the article that led Johnny on her journey to spiritual healing with the Unity movement. Curious about the healing words in the article, Johnny inquired of her mother, who obviously placed a magazine there because Johnny, of course, ignored it. Her mother, Lula Parker, and she asked her mother, who would write such a thing? Her mother suggested that she visit Unity. So off to Unity Farm, Johnny was very clear, it was known as Unity Farm at that time, she went to get an understanding. In 1953, she registered for a 4-week study program over a 4-year period. Johnny's student card, retrieved from the Unity Archives, on screen reads, began studying Unity in 1953, had a physical challenge and was given a weekly Unity by her mother, was so inspired, immediately came to Unity Village. Training school was going on and she sat in on some of the classes and was overjoyed. Upon her enrollment at Unity Farm, Johnny discovers that she is not permitted to live in student residential housing. When she asks the reasons why, she is told the policy is due to the color of her skin, as Reverend Ellen said, because this city was a sundown town, which means people who look like me could not be in the area after sundown because there ain't no telling what's going to happen when it's daylight. So when the sun go down, you're really going to be in trouble. Determined to learn the universal spiritual principles that were sure to set her free, Johnny locates a room at the local YMCA, and I'm looking for that YMCA while I'm here, 15 miles away. She drives 30 miles each day round trip to study at Unity Farm while her Caucasian classmates enjoy the privilege of on-campus living. During her last years of study, approximately 1955 to 56, Johnny Coleman challenged Unity's policy of excluding non-Caucasians from housing accommodations on campus, especially in light of the Unity teachings on love. She threatened to leave the school. However, her classmates, including Catherine Ponder and Betty Brown, circulated a petition in support of Johnny living on campus. Her final year, Johnny received a letter from Unity. Johnny states, or she writes, and I have it in her handwriting, that in the letter I was told to go to the cottage where the workers lived under the trees at the end of the farm. My mother and I slept in the workers' cottage, and it was cold that night. My friends in Lee's Summit brought us blankets in the middle of the night. Johnny said that she accepted the accommodation because she understood that God was serving a bigger purpose. The door of equality was being opened in a nonviolent and peaceful way for the students of color who would follow in her footsteps at Unity. The door of opportunity was open for people of color and others to live on Unity's campus to this day. So every time I wake up at Unity, I say, thank you, Johnny. Amen? Amen. After each of her summer studies, Johnny returned home and began to teach what she had learned to others. She attracted students by inviting them to dinner. First, there were 4, then 6, then 8, 7 of whom were women. The 8 grew to more than 50 persons, and I have some names up there. I verified those, and one of the initial members is still alive. Isn't that beautiful? Johnny's student card reads that Johnny appeared before the committee on May 31, 1956. This is to graduate now from Unity. and she answered the committee's examining questions with complete conviction and assurance and with a very good understanding of truth principles. Now, this is what her card says. It was the unanimous opinion of the committee that she's an outstanding and beautiful person in every way. Johnny continues to grow her ministry, Christ Unity Temple, in the city of Chicago. Johnny is ordained as a Unity minister in 1958. And if you look closely, you'll see that Catherine Ponder is in her class. Yeah, they were classmates and very close. Having established Christ Unity Temple of Truth on October 14, 1956, with 54 people, Johnny named again a woman, Esther Stewart, her assistant minister. Johnny was the first to build, that means from the ground up, a Unity church in Chicago. As her ministry expanded, she kept the doors of her mind and heart open to everyone, including women. As her ministry continued to thrive, she began to search for a larger meeting location. In 1968, Johnny Coleman is elected the vice president of the Association of Unity Churches. She's the first person of color to hold the position. It would, however, be 2 years before Johnny could assume the presidency because Unity changed its rules, preventing her from becoming president for 2 years. Yet she pressed on, working tirelessly to unify the movement along the lines of race, justice, and equality. And that's Johnny having the crown put on her head. Thanks to the Unity Archives. Thank you, Jolene. Johnny was always asking God for ideas that would include people rather than exclude them. In 1968, her ministry hosted Unity's first diversity conference in 1968 on the very day when Chicago's newspapers carried banner headlines announcing that public schools would desegregate in the city's suburbs. Wow, what a key moment, right? More than 40 Unity ministers, and this is a pool Johnny Coleman had, more than 40 Unity ministers and other leaders attended, representing 7 states. They met to strategize ways to be more inclusive and to share New Thought's message of peace, nonviolence, freedom to others who were looking for answers to life's pressing questions. A 10-point, this is what I love, a 10-point plan of action. Let me say that again. A 10-point plan of action resulted from the meeting. One of the points was this, that Unity defer assigning a minister to a church which would forbid the acceptance of any person because of their race. Isn't that cool? Reverend Richard Billings was present at the 1968 Diversity Conference. He reported that he was the first Unity minister to invite Johnny Coleman as a guest preacher at his all-Caucasian church in Michigan. In 1974, it doesn't look like this. I hope the slides sync. Yeah, I hope they sync. In 1974, Dr. Johnny resigns from the Unity movement and establishes the Universal Foundation for Better Living, an independent network of ministries that today offers its messages of love, peace, justice, and equality for all, and service globally through its network of ministries. The basic textbooks are the Bible and Lessons in Truth by Dr. H. Emily Cady. The 9-point statement of faith begins, we believe that it is God's will that every individual on the face of this earth should live a healthy, happy, and prosperous life. Yeah, I don't think it's synced. It's okay. It's not synced. It's okay. Research shows, and I was present at the time, 30 years later, after Johnny left Unity, in 2004, Unity's then CEO, Tom Zender, offered a public apology to Dr. Johnny Coleman on behalf of Unity for Unity's behavior towards her. Dr. Coleman publicly accepted the apology, and all of that happened right here on the grounds of Unity Village. In addition to welcoming women and men at all levels of the Universal Foundation for Better Living, Johnny served as the founding president of the board of directors until the summer of 1995. I was there for that too. We were in the Bahamas when she appointed another powerful woman who is my direct teacher, her student, the Reverend Dr. Mary A. Tumpkin, known as the Bible-toting metaphysician. And Mary assumed presidency of UFBL. When Dr. Tumpkin made her transition in November 2013, then first Vice President of UFBL, Burnett L. Jones, who is the minister of our church in Baltimore, Maryland, became the interim president. And then effective January 1, 2015, I was elected UFBL president. So women have always served in all positions on the UFBL board and in their local ministry. As it pertains to female leadership, this is another slide that's not there yet. Women who influenced Johnny, you have the Reverend Dr. Helen Carey, and these are new slides, so I'm not sure why they're not there. The Reverend Dr. Helen Carey was her longtime assistant. The Reverend Dr. Barbara King went to ministerial school actually because she was complaining because the Baptists wouldn't let her be a minister. And Johnny says, "What's stopping you? Get over to Unity." And she went over, and the rest is history. Other influences, Dr. Mary Tumpkin, and then Johnny's buddy, if she always called her buddy, and that was Della Reese-Lett. You guys know from Touched by an Angel. Also, if you're into gospel music, the great Albertina Walker and Johnny were great buds. Other women, you can go to that other slide, were like Lula Parker, her mother, of course. Vera Dawson Tate, when Johnny first came on the campus of Unity Farm, Vera Dawson Tate, who's known as Miss Lessons in Truth, I love her. I studied Lessons in Truth under Vera Dawson Tate. Vera Dawson Tate was standing at the gate and said, "May I help you?" And Johnny said, she has this in writing too. Johnny said, "I came here because they said I'm gonna die." And she said, "Well, we teach you how to live here." And so her and Vera Dawson Tate. Catherine Ponder, she also sought out Catherine Kuhlman. If you don't know who she is, you look her up. Other influences from Johnny, far and wide. Norman Vincent Peale. I remember sitting in Chicago. Norman Vincent Peale was our speaker in the 80s for our Panorama of Truth conference. Oprah Winfrey, Johnny's choir sang on Oprah's show many times, accompanied Della Reese there, and Oprah would sit in Johnny's services because remember when she came out of Baltimore, she came to Chicago, she went to Christ Universal Temple. Les Brown was actually ordained by Johnny Coleman and was Della Reese and Mary Tumpkin's classmate. Judge Greg Mathis, ran into him recently in the airport, and I mentioned her name, and he said, "My girl." Gladys Knight, who of course was married to Les, she came to POT, sang for us. That place went crazy. Her and Dionne Warwick walked in there, honey. Barack Obama, when he was Illinois senator, spoke at Johnny's church on Father's Day. He did a Father's Day message when he was a senator. Former mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington, Reverend Jesse Jackson, all buds with Johnny. Blaine Mays loved Johnny. Lord, he would stand at the INTA conferences and cry. Talk about the number of times Johnny saved INTA by financially supporting it. Iyanla Van Zant, Ben Vereen, Lola Fontana, and many more. Johnny's work continues through her books, DVDs, ministries, and the teaching arm of UFBL, the Johnny Coleman Theological Seminary, where the Reverend Dr. Anna Price serves as the provost and academic dean. Johnny Coleman's church, Christ Universal Temple, located at 11901 South Ashland Avenue in Chicago, is the first mega church built in Chicago and is pastored by the Reverend Derek B. Wells. The healing message of UFBL continues. Do you have the daily inspiration slide there? I don't know if you do or not. No, the next. Oh, you think she's going to sing if I go to that? Okay, anyway, the healing message of UFBL spreads daily. We have the daily inspiration for better living, and it circulates in more than 6 countries as a published document. But you know, now that it's also electronically available, you never know where they're going to end up. And so I close with a healing word from Dr. Johnny Coleman from an album that she produced for her buddy, Della Reese.
To all of God's children everywhere, may the love of God illumine your way. May the will of God direct you every day. And may the very peace of God ever dwell in your heart. God bless you, everyone. Amen and amen.
UFBL.org. And on June the 14th, we celebrated our 50th anniversary. We'll be celebrating all year long, so you'll be hearing more about that. God bless you and thank you. Haven't they been wonderful?
So we have a question for the panel. You know, the question is about, you know, with all of the rich history that we've been talking about, and by the way, thank you each and every panelist. Your presentation is amazing. And I feel so honored to be a part of an organization that has birthed so many amazing women who have really just changed the world as far as I'm concerned. But the question is centers. I gotta say center, because my congregation, when I first opened up Ahava Center for Spiritual Living, I was blessing all the centers, but I said centers, and they came to me and said, "Now, I thought we didn't believe in sin, and why are you blessing all the sinners?" So I gotta make sure I say centers. So what do you think it means to the future of the world with all this rich history, and what women have done to further the leadership of the women's movement and the relationship to spirituality? You know, it continues to evolve in many, many religious organizations today. And what do you think that means in the broader sense of the word, and what's happening in the world today with women's ministries? It's kind of a confusing question, isn't it? I'm just reading it. Really, what I want to know is if you all have any questions of this amazing panel. They don't have any questions, so I think we can go home. Yes, ma'am? Okay.
I'm the executive director of Unity Urban Ministerial School. And one of the ladies who I wish would have been mentioned, and maybe for the next time, followed in Johnny Coleman's footsteps. And that is Reverend Dr. Ruth Mosley, who founded Unity Urban Ministerial School. And it was because of Johnny's bold move to announce to the world Unity's hypocrisy that appeared in the July 1978 issue of the Ebony magazine, which had a readership at that time of over 1 million people around the world. So in that article, people around the world, many for the first time hearing Unity at all, heard that Unity had some policies, and as was shared, the sundowner laws of the state of Missouri and many southern states prevented Blacks from being able to be seen at a certain time of day or even live in certain places, eat in the cafeteria with the other students, swim in the swimming pool, or use any of the amenities on this campus. And when Johnny's article appeared in the magazine, which I just happen to have because I'm working on my doctorate in ministry, and I'm using that as an example of how Unity has evolved. When Johnny's article appeared, it was like the shot heard around the world. Reverend Stan Hempson asked Ruth after the article appeared, "What can we do for your people?" And Reverend Ruth said, "We need our own school, educate us." That was the beginning, and a couple of years later is when it was approved, of Unity Urban Ministerial School. So Reverend Dr. Ruth Mosley was one of those whose names probably should appear among the women, outstanding women leaders in Unity.
Thank you so much. Wow. I thought I saw somebody's hand up over here. Anybody have a question? Yes, ma'am.
I can answer that question. Yes, so we are there Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4. So you can come by anytime. We're in the 200 building. Oh, I can't point from inside. I think that way. 200 building.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
It was a wonderful, everyone's wonderful. Thank you so much.
And the Science of Mind archives will be open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
When eventually,
Oh, we're open now. Well, you betcha. You got to just pardon our boxes, you know. But you can say you saw it when. And so definitely come visit.
I don't want to take anyone's question if you have a question, but I did want to add that when Emma came to the Chicago World's Fair, Emma Curtis Hopkins had the opportunity to be in the World Parliament of Religions, and she chose not to. She was in the women's tent. And our Hopkins associations were presented not as a religion, but as a way for women to become independent and empowered. So that was built into the teachings for all of these generations of teachings. I love it. Thank you.
Well, we're just finding out all kinds of things.
Yes, and that's why the tagline for all of our ministries is for better living.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes, ma'am.
I love New Thought history. That's why I have a metaphysical research closet library. But you left something important out.
Okay.
When Ernest Holmes went to study with Emma Curtis Hopkins, he didn't know how she operated. He didn't know what she did. He didn't know. He expected her to ask him questions or tell him stuff, and they just visited for a little over an hour. And then she said, "Okay, today's lesson is done. You can leave now." And he had no idea. Of course, he was better prepared the next time. But he started out not knowing what was going on when he got to Emma. Good for Emma.
Thank you. I think this young lady over here had a question. Go ahead. It's for the it's.
Okay, what I came to talk to you about today is, no, actually, this has been very, very fascinating. And what I want to know is, you've told us where we've been and how we've gotten here today. What do you see happening in the next 10 years with all of these organizations coming together? What do you see happening?
I can start. I will start. One of the things that's happening is since INTA 2 years ago when they were in Chicago, since that time, the leaders of New Thought, meaning the Sonis of the world, I think Ed was in the seat before you were, Ed Villon, Dr. Soni now, myself, Michael Beckwith, anyone leading an organization in New Thought, Anton, everybody. Yeah, everybody who's leading an organization has been invited to a once a month prayer call just for United Consciousness to come together and pray. Just to pray, not to push a program, not to say, I'm having this, will you come? But just to pray. And Anton is sponsoring the technology for that in terms of the Zoom calls and everything. And the call is no more than 10, 12 minutes. We have something, we just go through opening prayer, hold the consciousness around a particular something that someone wants and resonates with. We listen, and then we meditate for like 5 minutes. Then there's a closing prayer, and we're out of there. That's it. But I think it's a great start to us uniting. I read something in Joel Goldsmith's writings, and he said, until the leaders around a movement unite, then how will the people go beyond if the leaders aren't there? Yeah. And so in reading that, the invitation was extended for all of us to do that. So that's where we started. I think in the presentations that you're going to hear more intersections and opportunities for us to work together. But my short answer to your question is, let's be New Thought. See, a lot of us are, no, I'm not going to say that. I ask myself, are you going to be New Thought in that space? Because it's tough. And you're going to sound a little different, right? But are you courageous enough to be New Thought, loving New Thought in that space, freeing people? Are you loving enough, or are you scared? Make sense? And so I have decided, I can't speak for anybody else. I've told our churches, I'm going to be New Thought as best as I understand it. That's what I'm going to be, because it has worked in my what did Brooke Fanny say? That it's a way of living. I believe that. And so I'll be talking about that tonight. So it's a way of life for me. It's not just something I pick up and it's in a book. It's the way I live my life and the results I get from doing so. And if you're interested in that, I'm willing to share. But if you want X, Y, and I don't do that. That's not what I do. I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's not what I do. There are places you can go and get that, but this is what I do and who I am.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful for this feminine energy, because I watched this video of the shadow side of God, and it was about Carl Jung saying we have this patriarchal God who says if your wife or daughter displease you, you can kill them. Now, he said without the Sophia, without the divine energy, we can't have a greater idea of what our relationship is with the divine. So with all these women, have they promoted the divine feminine, a God of love, a God that embraces you, who says they're all my children? And we don't, I'm aching for that kind of God. And did they address that issue?
I can speak for me. You will not hear me refer to God in a male pronoun. I'm very mindful of that. I spoke once in California, and I'll never, you go to speak and you think you're going to speak, you're not going to speak, you're going to learn. And a young woman walked up to me and she says, when is somebody going to talk about the goddesses and the women? And I'm standing there thinking, I'm a woman in there, and I'm right on with the patriarchy, you see? And so I think it's something we need to be mindful of. A lot of it is just tradition that's still flowing through, but as we become more attentive to and mindful of our audience, where they are, what's happening in the world, then we can begin to formulate a language, a response that is inclusive in nature, and then we don't get stuck. That's the thing, not to get stuck, I think.
And for Dr. Ernest Holmes, in the 1926 version of the textbook, if you search, there's a section where he talks about male and female energies. And he said that the most healthy person who has a balance of both the male and female energies. And I think that's pretty progressive for 1926.
I'd like to continue with that earlier question about the future.
Let me bring you a microphone.
So she invited us to continue with the question about the future. And I do want to share a little bit about the past. When I started at the Science of Mind Archives, like it was in my bio, I ran a domestic violence shelter. That was my experience and background. I was like, wow, I need to learn how to run an archive. And Spirit brought me here for some great reason. And so we came out with one of my volunteers to Unity Village to meet the archivist. And it was Mark Shearer at the time. And they rolled out the red carpet and we met and we're like, and I was talking with B. McKinney over at INTA Archives, and we're like, we're working in silos. We're doing the same sacred work of preserving our history. We need to come together. So we started a New Thought Archives Consortium back 7 years ago, and we've been meeting monthly. We moved it to every other month. But it's like, gosh, who has expertise in digitization, who has expertise in this and that, and we come together and we share our resources. And so it's just how beautiful for us to come here. And I will give Dr. Barbara Fields credit because she was on the call for AGNT's archives and said she had a vision for a worldwide, a world headquarters for the New Thought archives for us to come together. We're doing the same sacred work. And I was talking with my beloved earlier, think about energies, right? Think about, we have like Dr. Ernest Holmes, personal belongings, you have the Fillmores. Just think about the energies in them. And now we're bringing it to this one campus and just how powerful, being quickened. Like when you walk into either one of these archives right now, you just feel there's like this sacredness and this holiness that each one of us can drink from. And so I just see that as so powerful, and that we coming together. So for the future, oh my gosh, I mean, we're unstoppable. We can absolutely get New Thought out into the world in greater ways, through the internet, connecting our websites, but just helping people worldwide to access this wisdom.
And this panel is one of the products of us coming together, because we're all in the archive group, right? I'm the newbie, I think, but we're all in the archive group. And so again, this is a birth that has come forth, that has emerged because we came together. And I'll just let everybody else speak.
For the sake of time and for Celeste doing her, since she's up next, and we do want to respect Celeste, we went to school together and she keeps telling me that every day. You better respect me, girl. I'm just going to invite us all to do a quick, short prayer. It goes like this, and so it is. Thank you.
Put your hands together for this phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal